Welcome back. So, I'm still reading the narrative of Moses Ropa, and I must confess that I found it hard coming back to the narrative. I love Harriet's narrative, but Moses Ropa's narrative is hard because it contains such cruelty, and it's hard to read it, and it's hard to expect other people to listen to it. So, why continue? Well, I was thinking that the cruelty, the atrocities, that's the oppressor's history. The amazing history of survival, resistance, liberation, trying to thrive. That's our history. So to see it, it's like the diamond against the beautiful black velvet, the cruel coldness of the diamond and the soft beauty of the black velvet. Yeah, so I'm reading it and I'm pressing on. There are several circumstances which occurred on this estate while I was there relative to other slaves, which it may be interesting to mention. Hardly a day ever passed without someone being flogged. To one of his female slaves, he had given a dose of castor oil and salts together. I think this is something that causes people's bowels to get loose. We use castor oil in Jamaica. I think that might have been one use. As much as she could take, he then got a box about 6 feet by 2.5 and 1.5 feet deep. So it's a long box but very shallow. He put the slave under the box and made the men fetch as many stones as they could get to keep her trapped and put them on top of it. Under this she was made to stay all night. I believe that if he had given the slave one, he had given her 3,000 lashes. Mr. Gooch was a member of a Baptist church, his slaves thinking him a very bad example of what a professing Christian ought to be, would not join the connection he belonged to, thinking they must be a very bad set of people. There were many of them members of the Methodist Church. On Sunday, the slaves can only go to church at the will of their master when he gives them a pass for the time they are to be out. If they are found by the patrol after the time to which their pass extends, they are severely flogged. On Sunday nights, a slave named Allen used to come to Mr. Gooch's estate for the purpose of exhorting and praying with his brother slaves, by whose instrumentality many of them had been converted. One evening, Mr. Gooch caught them all in a room, turned Allen out, and threatened his slaves with 100 lashes each if they ever brought him there again. Can you believe a so-called Christian not wanting people to be converted? You know, and it's real. At one time, Mr. Gooch was ill and confined to his room. If any of the slaves had done anything which he thought deserving of flogging, he would have them brought into his bedroom and flogged before his eyes. Satan is busy. With respect to food, he used to allow us one peck of Indian meal each week, which after being sifted and the bran taken from it would not be much more than a half of peck. Meat we did not get for some time, several weeks together. However, he was proverbial for giving his slaves more food than any other slaveholders. So you hear that. He is starving and malnourishing them, but he's better than most. I stayed with Mr. Gooch a year and a half. During that time, the scenes of cruelty I witnessed and experienced are not at all fitted for these pages. There is much to excite disgust in what has been narrated, but hundreds of other cases might be mentioned. So if I struggled to read this, imagine what would happen if I actually heard everything. After this, Mr. Gooch, seeing that I was determined to get away from him, chained me and sent me with another female slave, whom he had treated very cruelly, to Mr. Britton, son of the before mentioned, a slave driver, a slave dealer. We were to have gone to Georgia to be sold, but a bargain was struck before we arrived there. Mr. Britton had put chains on me to please Mr. Gooch, but having gone some little distance, we came up with a white man who begged Mr. Britton to unchain me. He then took off my handcuffs. We then went on to Union Courthouse, where we met a drove of slaves. I hate that group name because it sounds like animals and they were people. The driver came to me and ultimately bought me and sent me to his drove. The girl was sold to a planter in the neighborhood as bad as Mr. Gooch. In the court week, the Negro traders and slaves encamp a little way out of town. The traders here will often sleep with the best looking female slaves among them, and they will often have many children in the year, which are said to be slaveholders' children, by which means through his villainy he will make an immense profit of this intercourse by selling the babe with its mother. They often keep an immense stock of slaves on hand. Many of them will be with the trade a year or more before they're sold. Mr. Marcus Rowland, the drover who bought me pausing here, notice how many titles they have for the different jobs in slavery, and America keeps trying to make out that slavery was insignificant because not everybody owned a slave. No, but you profited by some job that is slavery adjacent. Then returned with a slave to his brother's house, Mr. John Rowland, where he kept his drove on his way to Virginia. He kept me as a kind of servant. I had to grease the faces of the blacks every morning with sweet oil to make them shine before they were put up to sell. After he had been round several weeks and sold many slaves, he left me and some more at his brother's house while he went on to Washington. About 600 miles to buy some more slaves, the drove having got very small. We were treated well while there, having plenty to eat and a little work to do in order to make us fat. I was brought up more as a domestic slave, as they generally prefer slaves of my color for that purpose. When Mr. Rowland came back, having been absent about 5 months, he found all the slaves well, except one female, who had been grieving very much at being parted from her parents, and at last died of grief. He dressed us very nicely and went on again. I traveled with him for a year and had to look over the slaves and see that they were dressed well, had plenty of food, and to oil their faces. During this time, we stopped once at White House Church, a Baptist association. A protracted camp meeting was holding there on the plan of the revival meetings in this country. We got there at the time of the meeting and sold 2 female slaves on the Sunday morning. At the time the meeting broke up, to a gentleman who had been attending the meeting the whole of the week. While I was with Mr. Rowland, we were at many such meetings, and the members of the churches are by this means so well influenced towards their fellow creatures at these meetings for the worship of God that it becomes a fruitful season for the drover, who carries on immense traffic with the attendants at these places. Pausing. He has a similar sarcastic tone as Harriet, but his, because it's wordy, you don't get it as quickly. But he, like me, cannot understand how you can leave church and buy and sell people and enslave people. It just does not align. This is common to the Baptists and Methodists. At the end of the year, he exchanged me to a farmer, Mr. David Goodley, for a female slave in Greenville, about 14 miles from Greenville Courthouse. The gentleman was going to Missouri to settle, and on his way had to pass through Ohio, a free state. But having learned after he bought me that I had before tried to get away to the free states, he was afraid to take me with him. and I was again exchanged to a Mr. Marvel Lewis. He was in the habit of traveling a great deal and took me as a domestic slave to wait on him. Mr. Lewis boarded at the house of Mr. Cleveland, a very rich planter at Greenville, South Carolina. Mr. L was paying his addresses to the daughter of this gentleman, but was surprised and routed in his approaches by a Colonel Dorkin of Union Courthouse, who ultimately carried her off in triumph. After this, Mr. Lewis took to drinking to drown his recollection of disappointed love. One day he went to Peddleton races, and I waited on the road for him. Returning intoxicated, he was thrown from his horse into a brook and was picked up by a gentleman and taken to an inn, and I went there to take care of him. Next day he went to Pumpkin Town with Mr. Warren R. Davis, a member of Congress. I went with him. This was at the time of the agitation of the Union and Nullifying Party, which was expected to end in a general war. The Nullifying Party had a grand dinner on this occasion, after which they gave their slaves all the refuse for the purpose of bribing them to fight on the side of their party. The scene on this occasion was most humorous, all the slaves scrambling after bare bones and crumbs. That doesn't sound humorous to me, but as if they had nothing for months. When Mr. Lewis got over this fit of drunkenness, we returned to Greenville, where I had little to do except in the warehouse. There was preaching in the courthouse on Sunday, but scarcely had the sweet savour of worship of God passed when on Monday a public auction was held for sale of slaves, cattle, sugar, iron, etc. by Z. Davis, the High Constable, and others. Again, Moses Roper is pointing out, how do you go from church to enslaving people, your fellow humans? Moses Roper was too enlightened and too real in his faith to be able to understand this, and I'm glad for him. Tell me what you think. Thanks so much for listening.